What if I told you that a story published in 1941 predicted the utter horror that is the internet in 2026? When Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentinian master, penned the Library of Babel, he could not have predicted how accurate it would become. Pause. Not a now, the Library of Babel is not a short story in the traditional sense. It's part of a genre created by Borges, which he called ficciones, fictions. They are somewhere between an essay and a short story, and they are written in very poetical prose and describe paradoxes and are full of speculative elements, fantastical happenings that when you read them, they feel very mundane. Borges was heavily influenced by Kafka, among others, and he was very well read. So a lot of these stories, they touch upon a lot of real cultural artifacts, and they sometimes involve real books, or at least when you read one of the stories, you can't really tell what's real and what's not, because Borges knows more things than you and I put together. But you clearly understand that this story is fantastical from the first page, because the story is told by a librarian, a very old and dying librarian, who quickly mentions that when he's dead, his body will be thrown from the balcony and it will fall forever until it will decay in the air. So clearly this is not a real place. It's even obvious from the title, with the Library of Babel. But the issues that this story brings forth are very applicable to our current age, to the internet age, because the Library of Babel is an infinite library, and most books there are meaningless, and sometimes they vary by just one character. And towards the end of the story, or of the text, however you want to call it, you get this feeling of dread, of basically existentialist terror, that you're surrounded by so much information that you can't use. And in this story, there are two very interesting elements that are left open-ended. One is the Book of Vindications, and according to the universe of that story, each person, each librarian, because all the inhabitants of this universe are librarians, has a book that vindicates all of their actions. Basically, they provide meaning to one's life. At the same time, there is somebody, the man of books, or the bookman, who, depending on the translation, who read the catalog of books, and he's like a messiah figure. He read basically the index and wrote a book that if one can access, they can make sense of the library. Still, this doesn't happen. We have inquisitors who search and search for books, and they are described as already tired when they arrive in a new hexagon, in a new part of the library. At the same time, there are cults there who try to destroy all books, but even that is meaningless, because once you destroy a book, basically there might exist an almost identical copy somewhere, so even that is meaningless. Yet, what I found very striking is that there are some infidels, some librarians who give up all hope of finding meaning in books, and instead they find meaning in the lines of their palms or in their dreams. And this is basically what's happening right now. We are surrounded by information. Now, we have to talk a bit about brain rot, because it's very important for for understanding this story. Our brains experience brain rot because we are bombarded with information. We're basically bloated with knowledge 24/7, with stimulation. And maybe knowledge is not the best word. Maybe we should just use information, because knowledge is a prerequisite of wisdom. And we're not more wiser than our ancestors, than our parents' generation, because even though we may know more facts, we get easily lost in narratives, in new narratives. That's why we live in a world of alternative facts and fake news, because it's so easy to basically generate new narratives from all this mass of meaningless information. And this sense of dread permeates the 6 pages of this story, of this fiction. The narrator there is old and disheartened, and he has a faint hope that somebody out there might find meaning to all of this. It's obvious for him that this universe is artificial. Even though being so ancient, this universe, this library existing for so long, the librarians, its inhabitants, they forgot what exactly was going on. They described the light bulbs as strange fruit hanging. So the single light source in the whole universe of this short story is possibly electric light, because it's not something that they say that they maintain or something. It feels natural to them, but it's clear that this universe is constructed. They don't know by who, but it's obvious from a line thrown there that the way that the characters are written inside the books are perfect and black and neat, and the scribbling of the librarian fails, and there's no mention of a machine. So probably an interpretation might be that this might be some kind of supercomputer or super archive created by a once more advanced species. Borges leaves this open-ended intentionally. This is a hell, a Gnostic prison planet in a sense. It's very interesting for Borges that he chose a library as the setting of this inferno, as the form of this inferno. Why? Because Borges loved libraries. He was an avid reader. He was in 1955. He was named director of the National Library of Argentina, and it was at the same time when he went blind, completely blind. And that's something that I found very ironic, is that Borges had the capacity to understand how knowledge is not wisdom and information is not knowledge, that there's a difference. And that's, I think, what he tried to convey in this story. And most of the books inside of the Library of Babel, they're meaningless. They're just random characters. Still, this feels like the internet, but clearly not all hope is lost. We can still talk about Borges, and we can still find meaning in the works of Borges. We can still comprehend the hell that he is describing, and that honestly gives me a lot of hope, despite that the fact that we lived in this world of brain rot. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm Stefan Baciu, one of the greatest writers alive. If you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, follow my work on Substack over at Nether Street Blues. Many thanks to the whole Borges community from Reddit, and love to all my Borgesians out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Much love.